Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.
Alrighty, y'all. What a eventful week that we had of news. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. But before we get into that, just to get to this point of me recording was a very hard path. Shout out to Xfinity for having some of the most annoying customer service people who want to make small talk instead of actually solving your problems. Took me about 45 minutes to an hour to figure out some Wi-Fi stuff, and I could say maybe could have solved the problem in about 15-20. But the guy just wanted to talk about life. So shout out to that guy. Don't even know his name, but we're here. Hopefully I don't lose my natural light, but I do have my LED lights open up, so we might have a little nighttime vibe. I usually record closer in the afternoon, but I got a lot of stuff to do today, so I didn't really start trying to record until about 5 o'clock West Coast time, and now it is 6:19. So sunset's going to be in about an hour, so let's try to crank this out. I have other videos uploaded on my other channel, Beyond Half Court. Make sure you guys check that out. I just did a ESPN fantasy draft for the season. I also talked about why the Lakers are doomed and their season is already over, even though it hasn't even started. And I also have my predictions for award winners. So if you guys are interested in that, go check it out. For my YouTube watchers, you can check it. It's in the link below in the description. And for my listeners, it should be in the description of every episode. So, or the link to my link tree. That is. So if you're interested, you should go check that out. You can also follow me on Twitter. It's also in that link. Or if you don't want to go to the link, you just want to type it in, my Twitter username is at BHCT23. All right. So with that out of the way, let's just get started and let's just talk about the kind of craziest news that we have so far. It's the title of our podcast for today. And it's the Draymond Green versus Jordan Poole situation. So I'm actually happy that the news is kind of coming out quickly about this. But to start off, obviously, they got into a physical altercation. And based off what it was saying in the report, it was kind of like a verbal back and forth. And then it just got really physical with Draymond Green forcefully striking Jordan Poole. It didn't say where, but I did watch a clip of Shams. He was on the Pat McAfee show, and he had said that it was, it was like in this area, upper chest, lower jaw, neck area. So that's a pretty forceful strike. If you ask me, Draymond was very apologetic. He apologized to the team the next day, I believe. And it was supposed to be held internally, which I think was a good thing, especially for the Warriors, because the last time they had stuff going on with Draymond Green versus Kevin Durant, all that, the way they handled that situation was kind of the main reason, at least according to Draymond Green and Kevin Durant. The way they handled the situation, it was a lot more it didn't stay in house, right? In terms of the punishment. So they had a problem with that. So it seemed like the Warriors organization kind of learned from that mistake, but that was until one of their workers decided to leak the video that showed Draymond Green striking Jordan Poole right in the jaw. And, it's hard to tell. I don't know if Jordan Poole actually got knocked out, or not knocked out, but he got knocked to the floor. Because if you watch the video, he gets hit and he almost immediately drops to the floor. So I don't know if that's just him getting knocked out, you know what I mean? Or if it was just such a hard hit that it made him fall on the floor. But he, you're still conscious of and knowing what's going on. But yeah, it's just kind of a punk move by Draymond, in my opinion, especially if you watch the video, Jordan Poole is just kind of watching practice. He has his hands on his hips. He's not really worried about what's going on. And Draymond you can't tell why Draymond decided to go into Jordan Poole's face, but it just kind of ended up happening. And obviously, if someone is like in your face, like you're gonna want to push them away and tell them to back up, right? And it's actually funny. I showed the video to my dad, and my dad's like, "It's funny how Jordan Poole pushed Draymond, and Draymond kind of stayed in place, and Jordan Poole was the one who, he actually, when he pushed, he was the one that actually got sent backwards. It wasn't Draymond, but Draymond still decided, to punch him. To me, it's just kind of a punk move. I don't honestly think there is any reason why you should do that. Violence is not the answer in most circumstances, of course. I just don't feel like that was one of these circumstances. But overall, on top of it, I just feel like the leaking of the audio really makes things really complicated because, again, the initial reporting said that they were going to keep it in-house, so it seemed like it'd probably just be like a fine, but they weren't going to talk about it. They're just going to handle it, and they're just going to kind of brush it over. But once the video gets leaked and everyone sees what happens, now you have to handle it not in-house, because now it's a public thing. So a couple things that it could affect Draymond Green playing on opening night. Now based off what I was seeing today, it seemed like that probably isn't going to happen, but it could still technically be on the table. I'm expecting a huge fine for sure. Don't know how much. I don't know what the minimum fine you can give, but I'm assuming it would be a little bit more than that, maybe a lot more. But I'm definitely expecting a fine for sure. But yeah, on top of that, this just kind of messes up just what the year could look like, because a couple things to keep in mind is that Jordan Poole is eligible for a contract extension. So, we haven't really heard from him about the situation, but that could affect maybe him wanting to return next season. That is a very, realistic possibility. And Draymond, I think he has this year, and the next year is a player option, but he, is also eligible for an extension. So, is this going to be such a big deal to the point where the Warriors are going to have to choose between Draymond or Jordan Poole? I just don't think. I mean, they can still be a really good team, right? But I feel like this situation has kind of just fucked over their season. I just don't see how this could be brushed over, even if the video didn't, leak, right? Obviously, they could say that everything was fine, but I feel like that was just seeing the video. That was kind of insane that Draymond did that. I would be very surprised if, those guys are ever, quote unquote, friends, because obviously we don't know what their relationship was like. It seemed like they were on good terms. Obviously, they're on the same team. You would only, hope to assume that, but it's very weird. And obviously you hear you don't have to be friends with people. You just got to go out there and win. And, that's true. But I think you still have to consider that this could be a problem just throughout the season. And it's going to take time, right? So it could potentially affect the way they start out the season. Yeah, just a lot of things to consider. Not too much other than that to be said. I feel like if you are the Warriors, though, if you did have to choose between the two, I think they ultimately just stay with both and they give both of them the extension and they just try to figure it out. But if they did end up having, to choose one, I honestly would not be surprised if they just, took Jordan Poole's side. I know Draymond is a huge integral part of the Warriors' success, and I'm honestly one of Draymond Green's basketball supporters, right? I'm not in support of him punching a person, but just in terms of his basketball ability, I feel like he's very underrated. I think people underrate him because he can't score, and yeah, that's very true, but he does everything at an elite level. He's a great defensive player. If you watched my award-winning predictions, I actually have him as my defensive player of the year winner for next season. He's a great playmaker. He's obviously leads the team in assists almost every season. So, huge part in the Warriors' success, but, Jordan Poole is the future. And I mean, if you're looking, at Curry's age, at Clay's age, and his now, injury history at this point, like you have to stay young. Like you have to have like a young core. And I feel like that's Jordan Poole, that's Moses Moody, that's Kuminga. Obviously, you can still extend both Poole and Draymond and eventually, just trade Draymond later. Like he can get his money. But if they decide to just kind of let him go, like after this season, right? I believe Draymond Green has a player option. What if it came to the point where it's like the relationship between Draymond and the Warriors was just like unfixable and Draymond decided to go somewhere else, right? He's going to obviously be an unrestricted free agent and he'll be able to get money. And I'm assuming he would be looking for something similar to the amount that he would be getting in the extension. I'm not too sure if teams are going to be willing to pay him that much. And the main reason why I think that is it's not necessarily because I think he's worth that money, but depending on what team he joins, I think will affect one, how well he plays, but how well he meshes into that team as well. Because when you think about Draymond and the role he plays, a big part of his success is being able to be next to Steph and Klay Thompson, right? And then obviously Kevin Durant a couple years ago. The whole offense kind of revolves around Draymond being, a ball screener, doing short roll, being able to, make quick decisions, right? But if you put Draymond on the Pistons, his impact, at least in my opinion, is not going to be as strong as, being on the Warriors. Now, there are some teams that could definitely fit Draymond. You can look at the Blazers. Obviously, they have Dame, Josh Hart. They got shooters on their team, right? But especially Dame, if you're talking about a comparison to Steph Curry, personally, I don't think Damian Lillard is anywhere near Stephen Curry in terms of, how good he is. But in terms of how he plays, it's very similar. It's probably the most similar to Steph in terms of, being able to come off the ball, still being able to do on-ball stuff, while also being a little bit of a playmaker. Obviously, I think Draymond would be a good fit for the Blazers. I think even being on the Mavs could be a good fit with Luka. I think it would definitely help Luka expand his game a little bit more. I feel like Luka is definitely going to be a lot more on the ball this season. So just adding Draymond, I think, adds a different layer to the Mavericks offense. But outside of that, I think maybe the Hawks, but they added DeJounte Murray. So I think that kind of messes things up a little bit more. The spacing isn't all there. Like having a team with DeJounte Murray and Clint Capella and Draymond, like all three of those guys on the court together, the spacing would be not very good. Even with Draymond's ability, to move around the floor and be quick and be a good playmaker, that's at this point of his career, that's what's gotten him out of trouble with not being able to space the floor. Because him and Looney like together is fine, but that's because you have Steph on the team, right? So when you don't have spacing around Draymond, that lack of spacing from Draymond does become more of a problem. But yeah, I can't really think of any other teams outside of the Mavs and the Mavericks and the Blazers for Draymond to be a good fit. I'm actually looking at the teams right now to just see maybe the Raptors. I mean, Raptors have some spacing on their team. Could always use more playmaking. They always love the versatility, especially on the defensive end. Maybe the Celtics. But again, like Draymond is going to be expecting a certain amount of money. I don't think he's going to be taking a veteran's minimum to go join the Celtics. He very well could, but if I'm Draymond, this is probably the last big payday that you're going to get. So you're going to want to get the most that you can get, and then eventually, you'll take the minimum contracts. But when you think about it, it's just like there's not a lot of teams out there that I think are going to be willing to pay that. And that's kind of like my main thing is the future is a little bit weird for Draymond. But that's kind of all I had to say about that. We'll see if any more information comes out about the situation. Maybe we'll hear from Jordan Poole. And if we do, I'll definitely make sure to talk about that. Two quick things that I wanted to talk about before we get into some of the preseason games that I watched. I wanted to talk about the Tyler Herro extension. Let me get the exact numbers for this extension real quick. Scrolling on to Twitter. Where's it at? What I think the extension, from what I believe, here it is. So the Miami Heat guard Tyler Herro, this is coming from Woj. The NBA's reigning sixth man of the year has agreed to a 4-year, $130 million contract. So just based off of that alone, $130 million in 4 years, that's about $32.5 million a year. Now that sounds crazy. But based off what I was seeing at the time of the reporting, is that a lot of that money is actually off of incentives. If I saw this correctly, and if this is true, one of the incentives was him winning Defensive Player of the Year, which is not happening. So he would get an extra $1 million for that. So I think about 10 to like $15 million is in incentives. So that number does go down, which is quite good for the Miami Heat. But I think getting paid $30 million a year is almost guaranteeing that he's going to be starting next season. So that's pretty interesting now, because they'll have Kyle Lowry, Tyler Herro, Jimmy Butler. They're all going to be starting together. So now they're going to have their best possible lineup out on the floor. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works. But my only concern with Tyler Herro at this point is just like in the playoffs, he gets, virtually played off the court because he's just such a bad defender. And his offense is, especially the last 2 playoff series, he has not been able, to do what he did in the bubble. And honestly, like if he performed like he did in the bubble, he'd be able to stay on the court because he was really good offensively. But if you're not, if you're not shooting the ball all too great, and you're also not defending at a high level, or even just an average level, and you're not really playmaking for other people, then you're just going to kind of get played off the court. So that would be my only concern about paying him $30 million. Some people might say it's an overpay, but I feel like every time someone gets extended, they just call it an overpay. But what ends up happening is 3 years, when they get towards the end of their deal, it's actually a good deal. Because when you look at other players in their same like tier, like Jordan Poole is probably going to be getting something similar to Tyler Herro, I believe. And you can say that's an overpay, but by the time they get to the end of their contract, like that's going to be what they're worth. So I don't think this is an overpay, but I just do have concerns about Tyler Herro and how he could progress. I don't know how good of a defender he can actually be. He can at least be an average defender, and I think it would be okay. I'm not expecting him to be, Tony Allen, but I'm expecting him to at least play, put some effort on that end. Because at points, like, it just doesn't even look like he's trying. So hopefully Tyler Herro could figure that one out. Next thing I wanted to talk about, though, had to turn on my fan. It's getting a little toasty in my room. But, the next thing I want to talk about, this actually came out the day I was recording on Saturday. This obviously comes out on Sunday. Rob Pelinka gets extended till 2025, I believe, with the Lakers. And yeah, this is kind of just dumb. And I'll be really quick on this, but Rob Pelinka literally has done nothing to deserve an extension. He just hasn't. He didn't get LeBron there. Magic did. Magic is the one who brought in LeBron. The only thing Rob Pelinka did was get Anthony Davis. And honestly, I wouldn't even credit him for doing that, because I feel like if he was there or not, Anthony Davis was coming to the Lakers, because he virtually forced himself to go there. That was the only team he wanted to go to. That's the only team that the Pelicans were going to be able to do a trade with, because Anthony Davis isn't going to want to go to the Celtics, because the Celtics aren't going to give a good package for the Pelicans to receive back. So I don't even think that Pelinka deserves to do that. I feel like if anything, Pelinka has made the team worse, at least over the years. I think he just randomly stumbled upon a championship team in 2020, and since then he's kind of just ruined everything. Obviously, after they won the championship, they added Montrezl Harrell, they added Dennis Schroeder to lessen the load on LeBron. And I talk about this a little bit on my other video, on my other channel, about why the Lakers are doomed. And I just feel like, signing those guys, I understand lessening the load for LeBron, but if you actually look on Basketball Reference and you check how many games he played and you check how many minutes he was playing like some all-time low minutes for him. And it was one of his healthiest seasons. Like, obviously the season before that, he just came off an injury and he came back playing on the injury to try to make it to the playoffs. And he obviously just wasn't 100%. Like, that was one of his most healthiest season, and he was playing the point guard position. But what they ended up doing was signing other guards and other players to help him, thinking it would lessen the load. It didn't, because they were so bad that he ended up having to play 38 minutes anyway to even try to compete. Like, that didn't make any sense. And then to just make matters worse, they got Westbrook. Like, you didn't need to get Westbrook. They had the blueprint. And again, I say this in my other video. They had the blueprint to what wins championships for them with LeBron at the 1 and Anthony Davis at the 5. And you surround them with 3-and-D players. And you want to know what they did? They signed other point guards that they didn't need to sign. They signed big men who could not be played in the playoffs, like Montrezl Harrell, because he can't play defense. He can't guard anyone. And then eventually they got Westbrook, who you have to cater to for your offense. And Westbrook just does not fit at all. And on top of that, even if you want to make that Westbrook trade, they didn't do anything to make sure that Westbrook would fit in good with LeBron and AD, because they signed all these aging vets who weren't even good shooters and they weren't even good defenders. And they were signing people like Stanley Johnson and Wayne Gabriel to try to save their season, which eventually didn't even happen because they didn't even make the play-in tournament. So to me, Rob Pelinka getting an extension is just not deserved. I don't really think he's done anything to deserve that. I think this is just another bad move. The Lakers front office, as much success, I guess you could say they had because they did make it to the finals and they won. But outside of that year, since LeBron, they really haven't done anything. They missed the playoffs in the first year. They won. And then the next one, they lost in the first round. And then they didn't make the play-in. It's not deserved. In my opinion, it's just not deserved. And honestly, I think they should have found someone else to run the team. But the Lakers are a mess just in general. That was just a small part of the reason why I thought the Lakers were doomed. Again, if you want to check out that video, it's on the Beyond Half Court channel. But yeah, I don't agree with the Rob Pelinka signing, but enough of that, enough ranting. I wanted to talk about a little bit of the preseason games that I watched. I only watched the first half of 3 games. I do have another job, so I don't have a lot of time to catch up on these games. But I figured that, the main players that I wanted to see weren't going to play all 4 quarters anyway. So just a couple notes that I wanted to have. We'll start with the first one that I saw. It was the Nets versus the Sixers. And just one note that I had, that Ben Simmons was really involved in a lot of action and brought the ball up a lot. And, it's very dangerous, and it's a really good tactic for the Nets to use, to have Ben Simmons bring the ball up, because when you have Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant next to you, and then eventually they'll have Seth Curry, they have Joe Harris right now, he's back. You have so much spacing around Ben Simmons that having him in transition is going to be really good for them. But, I think all in all, he needs to be more aggressive, going to the rim. I felt like because he has so much talent, I just feel like he was even more inclined to not really attack the basket as much as he really should, because he can overpower a lot of people with his strength. That limits his lack of willingness to just get the ball, go downhill, and try to make a layup. His unwillingness to do that affects how impactful his playmaking actually is. Because if you think about it, if Ben Simmons does, a dribble handoff, or he does a ball screen, right, for Kevin Durant, if he does that 3 times in a possession, and he doesn't, he rolls, but he doesn't really roll with passion or effort, or he's not rolling hard. So it's Kevin Durant can do a little dump off pass and he gets a dunk on someone, he's not really doing that. He's kind of just passing the ball and hoping that Kevin Durant can get around the screen and do something on his own. If the defense can just predict that every single time, and there's no, variety in what Ben Simmons is doing after he passes off the ball, I think that just affects how, impactful his playmaking actually is. But so that was kind of the main thing that I saw from that game. Tyrese Maxey was insane in that game as well. Tyrese, honestly, if James Harden isn't back to, even something remotely close to what we saw in Brooklyn, I could honestly see a debate where Tyrese Maxey is the second best player on the team, with James Harden obviously being a close second. But that would be really good for the Sixers. I talked about this a little bit in a previous episode, but the Sixers theoretically should be second best team in the East. Obviously, Bucks at number 1. I feel like that's pretty consensus feel like most people think that way, but I got to see it to believe it. I can't trust the Sixers right now until I see it happen. Every time I believe in the Sixers, they let me down. I am not a Sixers fan, but when they signed Al Horford, I hate myself for thinking that was a good team. It just wasn't, and I thought they were a good team, and they sucked. And it wasn't just because of Al Horford, but just that team in general was pretty bad. So yeah, the next game that I saw, it was another Sixers game, but they played the Cavs, so I was watching for the Cavs, and Donovan Mitchell looked really good, scored a lot of points, really efficient on it. Cavs offense in general looked really good, lots of cutting, which was really good, especially because there's questions about that 3 spot. And the questions behind the 3 spot are mainly because you have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen at the 4 and 5, right? So there's not much spacing coming from them. So then you just have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell coming out, right? And for them, like they obviously provide great spacing, but then at that small forward position, it's like, who's going to be your small forward? They actually started Karis LeVert at that 3 spot and not Isaac Okoro, which I thought they were. I think having Karis LeVert out there is probably their best option as like a shooter. But obviously defense is a concern, especially since Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell aren't the greatest defenders. I feel like that would kind of lean more into Mobley and Jared Allen just kind of carrying the defense, which I don't think is bad, but obviously you want to have some point of attack defenders because, if you run into some skilled players who can just shoot floaters over, the 2 big men, then it doesn't really matter that they're there. But yeah, I thought the cutting was really good because, the spacing is a question mark. So, it's Isaac Okoro made like 2 cuts on the basket. He's sitting in the corner. He's wide open. Darius Garland would like come into the paint and he'd have 2 defenders on him. But instead of passing it to Okoro, or passing to Okoro, at least in the corner, Isaac Okoro was smart enough to actually cut because by the time he got the ball, the defender wasn't going to be able to block him or like steal the ball. So you just got 2 easy layups. So I think that's a good thing for the Cavs. I think it's actually surprising that they meshed that quickly, at least on the offensive end. Usually it takes a while for that stuff to mesh, especially with Donovan Mitchell being such a good player, such an offensive threat. You would think it'd take a little bit more time, but they looked really good. So hopefully that can continue. And then at that point, it seemed like Donovan Mitchell was kind of focusing more on the defensive end. He came out of the draft known as a defensive player, but since then he hasn't really done much on the defensive end. If at best he's been average, and I wouldn't give him that, honestly. I think he's been quite a below average defender in general since coming into the league. But the third and final game that I watched was the Lakers and Suns, and the Lakers were looking quick. Now, if I remember correctly, they haven't won a single preseason game, which again makes me feel good about me thinking that they're doomed because they could have at least won 1 game. But they were looking really fast, and I think that's good for them because again, there's not a lot of spacing. So if they're able to, in transition, score really quick and not allow the defense to set up and stop them from getting to the basket, because that's the thing. If the Lakers get stopped in transition and then they're running half court offense, that's just not going to work because they don't have spacing. So if they're able to score quick, oh my gosh, if they're able to score quick, then it doesn't allow the defense to set up and defend them properly. They'd be able to get to the bucket a whole lot easier. So I thought that looked really good. And on top of that, like, they were going quick, but they also weren't forcing. If something didn't look good, they passed to someone else, and I think that's generally a good thing as well. It keeps the ball moving. If you just let LeBron take over, which obviously like you would trust in a way, but if you just let LeBron just kind of dribble out the clock, it just makes them so much easier to guard. So I think a lot of ball movement is really good. Austin Reeves looked really good as well. Seemed to improve as a rebounder, an assister, as a playmaker, and even as a defender. Looked like he put on some weight, some strength. So I think that's really good for them as well. Westbrook also had a really good game in the Lakers-Suns game. He was cutting a lot, and he was actually shooting corner threes. And I think that's the success for, Westbrook. Actually had Westbrook as an X factor for the Lakers. A lot of times when he's shooting the threes, it's a lot of just like self-created threes. And they're not in the corner. They're always like on the wing or at the top of the key. And those are technically the harder threes to make. Like if you're Westbrook and you're having him shoot threes, I would much rather him shoot in the corner because it's closer. It's the technical easiest three you can make. So you would want your worst 3-point shooter trying to make it as easy as possible. But on top of that, like when he's cutting, like it just makes him so much more dangerous because obviously you have a LeBron on the team. You would want LeBron to have the ball in his hands more than Westbrook. And again, if you want Westbrook to succeed, it's not shooting, it's actually attacking the basket. So the more often he's able to cut, I think the better the Lakers are. So I really like to see that from them. I thought that was a good sign to see as well. And then just to add on to the Suns, I thought they, at least in that game, they looked really disjointed. Obviously, they played the 36ers and they lost bad against them. They should not have lost that game because that's an Australian team that even in their own league wasn't the greatest last season. Now, based off what I saw on Twitter, it seemed like they actually got better from that record. So I think their record was like 10-18 in their Australian league. So they should theoretically be better than that, but still, like United States players are always, it's like the Olympics, like we're supposed to win. So if you're not beating those guys, like what are you doing? That sort of thing. So that, and then even against the Lakers, I think they beat the Lakers. It was a really close game at the end, but they just look very disjointed. They don't. I think their bench is going to be kind of a problem. Cam Payne doesn't have the same juice that he did in that first year with the Suns. Cam Johnson coming in as a starter now, not coming off the bench. I think that hurts them as well. Dario Saric is coming back from his injury, but I don't think he's going to be the guy that's going to be carrying them to the promised land, at least off the bench. I don't think he's going to be that much of an impact. He's not going to be able to do what Cam Johnson was doing as a bench player. I just feel like in general, they've kind of lost their touch on the bench. Obviously, still a great starting lineup. Still, a team to look out for in the West, but just overall, just Suns look very weird. And again, you still have the DeAndre Ayton situation. Doesn't seem like he wants to be there. So we'll just have to see how the Suns do this season. I still think just based off paper that they should still be able to compete, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they are really bad and they end up trading Ayton. I think they're allowed to do it January, February. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, especially if they're not playing well. If they play well, he'll probably stay, but he'll probably end up leaving at some point if the Suns aren't doing very well. All right, and then with that out of the way, two more things to talk about. I want to talk about another preseason game, but not NBA. It's Victor Wembanyama versus Scoot Henderson. So I'll admit it, I missed the game. I missed that first one, and man, I really regret missing that first one. I had work that day, obviously, and I came home and I had to edit videos, so I wasn't able to catch it, but I did see the highlights, and man, I usually don't watch young draft talent. I usually just wait till they show up to evaluate them. Like, obviously hear like what people say, so I know what to look for when I'm watching them play. But dude, it was insane. Like what I was seeing. Like, just start off with Scoot Henderson because I don't feel like he gets nearly talked enough about. Because Victor Wembanyama is in the draft class as well. But he's super hyper athletic guard. Reminds me a lot of like a John Morant. Not saying he's going to be John Morant or even like a Russell Westbrook or John Wall, but he's really athletic, and I think he has the potential to actually be a pretty good jump shooter. He shot the ball pretty well that game, based off what people were saying. That's not like the usual, so that was good to keep in mind. Because I was like, there's no way this is like a Westbrook with a jump shot. Like, that's honestly like what I was thinking when I was watching him. But that doesn't seem to be the case overall. But just in terms of like his mechanics look really good. So I think there's definitely potential there to at least be a good mid-range shooter to like an average 3-point shooter. That just seems insane to me. He also seems to work really hard on the defensive end. Again, I didn't see the full game. I only saw like the offensive highlights, so I don't really know how good he is defensively, but obviously when you have that sort of athleticism, like, you're supposed to be a good defensive player, so that'd be a thing to look out for. In that second game, I catch the second game, not the full one. I'll get into that after I talk about Victor. because some BS happened to me on my TV for that. Shout out Xfinity again. Actually, I don't even know if this is an Xfinity problem. It's probably just an ESPN2 problem. But yeah, so Scoot didn't play that second game because of an injury. He had actually bumped knees with Victor Wembanyama, so that really sucked. But yeah, that first game, just super athletic. He had that one fake where he got the two of the defenders to jump up on it. That looked really good. That was really impressive. Great, just a great finisher. Super athletic. It's pretty much like the John Morant mold. Definitely deserving to be, one of the higher, scouted players in, next year's draft class. And then you go into Victor Wembanyama. Like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, there is no way he's able to do the stuff that he does on the court. I think he's listed at 7'4", but he said he was 7'3". But even then, like, it's insane to think about that sort of stuff. Being able to bring the court up the ball, dribble the ball, being able to cross over, do spin moves, fade away, like, just super off balance shots. I think he made 7 threes that game. He also had 5 blocks, and the only player to score 7 3-pointers and 5 blocks ever, at least in the NBA game, is Danny Green. That surprised me personally. I didn't think Danny Green was capable of getting 5 blocks a game, but he did it. And even if you want to count that as an outlier, I think Victor could definitely do that again. His shooting ability was really good. And then even in that second game, like he is a legit shooter. I think he's definitely good shooting. My only problem is, his height. I think sometimes his shot isn't consistent, like not in terms of like it not going in, but in terms of like the shot mechanics. I was watching a basketball breakdown video, and I noticed this in the game that I watched, or the highlights that I watched, and even the second game that I ended up watching, is when he is jumping, his knees actually like kind of bend into each other, and they should really just be kind of parallel to each other. They shouldn't be going in together. So that's a little bit of concern because it shows a little bit of inconsistency in terms of his shot mechanics. I also feel like sometimes when he shoots the ball, it's got a super high arc, and sometimes it's really flat. I actually don't think that's more of the mechanics. I think that's just more of him being super freaking tall, and I think that affects the way he shoots the ball. But it's going in. So obviously that's really good for now. We'll obviously have to see how that translates to the NBA. But the defensive potential for him as well was insane. Again, being so quick and lengthy, like he's able to recover. Like if he goes up for a block or he goes for a steal, he's able to recover and like jump again. And, that's really good. In today's age in the NBA, you have to be able to recover really quick. You got to be able to guard multiple positions. And I think that's something that Victor's going to be able to do. Obviously, the height is there, but in terms of like girth and actual like weight and size, I think that's something he's definitely going to have to, take care of to maybe lessen injury, because he is very skinny for his height. So that's something that he's going to be able to have to take care of for sure. And that can only help him on the defensive end, I believe, especially when you get post players like, Jokic or like an Embiid. Like they are going to take advantage of him, even if he is taller. Like, I just think that's going to happen. So he will have to put on some weight. I mean, not a lot of people can guard, Jokic or Embiid anyway, but you got to stand a chance. And I feel like at this point he doesn't, but that's fine. He's 18. Like, I'm not expecting him to be freaking Goliath. Like, I'm just not. That's not going to happen. And yeah, in that second game, Scoot Henderson ended up getting injured. He had bumped knees with Victor Wembanyama in that first quarter. So that kind of sucked. I wasn't able to watch him for that. Victor, again, was just showing the same kind of signs in that second game. And then shout out to ESPN2, because we get to the fourth quarter. Victor's team was down quite a bit. I think it was like 9 to like 12 points. I forget. And then about like the 6-minute mark, they go to commercial. And I'm noticing that the commercial was repeating and repeating. It's like the same 4 commercials for like, I don't know, it felt like 5 minutes. Eventually, I just kept the TV on, but I muted it because I was tired of hearing the same, like, medicine commercials about like, oh, like this medicine can give you heart failure or it can kill you, right? Like we all know those commercials. I was just tired of hearing about it. So I muted the TV and I look up, the game's not on. It went on for like 20 minutes. The commercials went on and on for 20 minutes. And then after that game was supposed to be NFL Live, and then just went to NFL Live. So I didn't catch the end of the game, but I did catch the highlights. And again, it's just more of the same of Victor Wembanyama brilliance, just insane shots that he was making. He had two of them that I know of. It was like a fadeaway shot in the mid-range area, and he was like a post move. He was fading right, I think, and then he goes back left on the baseline and he fades it over, and it was all net. And then he had one where he catches the ball like at the wing, takes one dribble, and moves all the way to the corner, and he's fading on a corner three, and it just splashes all net. And I couldn't believe it, man. It's honestly insane about what he's able to do on the court. I couldn't fathom someone like that. Like that's something that like we would think Giannis we couldn't even think Giannis could do that. Like, and KD like is obviously so skilled, but like Victor is just taller than him. He just is. So it's more impressive to see it from Victor because he's taller. I don't think, honestly, I understand the Kevin Durant comparisons, but we got to stop them. We just have to. I hate having comparisons about young players because most of the time they don't live up to them. And that's not to say that like they become bust, but it's hard to live up to Kevin Durant, who's like arguably a top 15 player of all time. It is what it is. But yeah, that's what I had about that. I'm really excited to see what teams are tanking, and well, I know what teams are tanking, but it'd be interesting to see what teams end up winning the lottery to get Victor. A couple teams that come to mind. I actually feel like the Spurs might be the best fit, just personally for him. Obviously, because he's from France. Tony Parker was with the Spurs. I feel like Spurs have a really good system in terms of overseas players. I feel like that would just be a perfect fit for like him as a person. But for what team I would want him to join, the Rockets would be great. I would love him to see with Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., Tari Eason, Jabari Smith Jr. That would be an insane core to build off of. So in terms of to make the best team in the future, I think the Rockets would be the best choice. But in terms of what's good for him, I actually think the Spurs would be good for him. Please do not put him on the Jazz, because you're going to make me watch Jazz games with those awful highlighter jerseys. I do not want to see those. So I pray to God that Colin Sexton carries the Jazz to a couple more wins than they should. Jordan Clarkson doesn't get traded, and they're able to win maybe like 30 games, because I don't want to see him on the Jazz. That would be really great. NBA gods, please listen to my prayers. Let's see, is there anything else? Oh yeah, so I watched the this is the last thing we're going to be talking about in this episode, but the I don't know if this is spoiler alerts, because we already know what happens, but I watched the Redeem Team documentary, and it was really good. I really liked it. Some great Kobe Bryant stories in there. It's always great to get insight in terms of like how the team got to where they were at that moment of time. So they give a lot of backstory on that. They go, back to 2004, and they go like almost year by year in terms of like what they built to get to where they got. They obviously won the gold. I think we all know that. But it's always great to see that. It's great seeing Kobe. They had stuff for recordings of him from 2015. So that was pretty close to, the last couple years of his life. So that was really good to see, really emotional. There's some points in there where, he gets brought up and, people allude to him, not being here anymore. Gigi's in the documentary. So, there's definitely some, sad parts in there, about Kobe. But Kobe was a huge instrumental part in this movie, which I'm really happy about. I hope that they do like some sort of Kobe Bryant documentary. I don't know if that's something that's in the works or not. But I feel like if one never came out in terms of like actual documentary, like people following him around and not just people recalling stuff about him, I feel like this would be a really good movie documentary to show about like how good Kobe Bryant was. But yeah, also on top of that, like the Redeem Team, like it's honestly kind of poetic how many meanings it has, because on top of it, just talking about, the Olympic USA team, redeeming themselves for, getting the bronze medal in the Olympics. I feel like almost every player on that team had something to prove, like, and they talk about it, LeBron, at least at that point of his career, was known as one of the better players, but didn't necessarily prove that he was, I wouldn't say trusted, but he had lost in the finals, and he's losing in second, third round. People just weren't sure about LeBron yet, right? He hadn't won any championships, and I think even at that point he didn't even win an MVP yet. So there's definitely some questions about him. He was arguably one of the best players, but people still weren't so sure. And Dwayne Wade, this was a big part of it as well. He ended up having injuries right before the Olympics, so not only did people just question him in general because he won in 2006, but he had all these the Heat weren't really good after that. Shaq ended up, not being there anymore, and Dwayne Wade was obviously still really good, but the team in general was awful. And he ended up battling injuries, so people had questions about him. Even Colangelo, he had questions about bringing him back on the Olympic team. So he had something to prove. And then Kobe Bryant, again, huge part of this. People were questioning just him as a person, especially since he virtually, kicked Shaq off the Lakers, and he eventually asked for a trade from the Lakers. He was looking, and there's also stuff off the court as well that people were questioning, but he was looking to prove himself again, and he saw that as an opportunity. And obviously they won, and we all know what happened in his career. So I just feel like it was a redeemed team for the Olympics, but it was also, a redeemed team for those guys that were on the team. A lot of people were trying to prove themselves. It was a lot of young guys, but a lot of, proven NBA stars that just not proven to be stars, but not proven to be like all-time greats. And I feel like this Olympic win was to transition into a lot of people's Hall of Fame career, like Kobe, like LeBron, and like Dwayne Wade, even Melo. Even if you want to debate if Melo is a Hall of Famer, Dwight Howard was also there. It's actually so funny. There's one guy on the team I could not recognize the face, and I swear, I'm a basketball savant. I'm especially in this 2000s era. I know a decent amount, not to brag or anything, but there's one face that I saw on the team. I'm like, who is that? It's freaking Michael Redd. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot Michael Redd existed. I just did. I had no idea Michael Redd was on the Redeem team as well. I really didn't. Did he even? I'll have to look. I don't know how much he played, but I wouldn't be surprised if he only played 5 minutes a game. I really wouldn't. But yeah, overall, I really like the documentary. It's really good. So if you haven't watched it already, you should definitely go watch it. It's on Netflix. And yeah, that was an eventful week of news that we had. We've been having some 30-minute episodes, unfortunately, because the off-season has been pretty dry. But I believe we only have 10 more, either 10 or 9 more days till the NBA season. I think 10 the day I'm recording this, 9 tomorrow when this goes up. But yeah, we're almost there, man. And we're almost there. We'll have one more episode before the season officially starts, and then we'll be going in. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode. If you did, make sure sub on the YouTube channel. Make sure you guys download the podcast anywhere else. Make sure leave a positive review. Of course, you can watch other videos on my podcast channel, or other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Spreaker. I also have another YouTube channel, Beyond Half Court. It's kind of popping right now, so you don't want to miss out on that. Link, of course, I said in the beginning, in the description, and also everywhere else that you can possibly find the link. Try to make sure, wherever you look, you'll probably find it. So go check out all that other stuff over there. But yeah, that'll be it. Hope you guys enjoy the weekend. Be fun. Have safe. Peace out.